Is up, everybody? My name is Chris Erickson. I'm one of the pastors here from Fountain Springs, and I want to say welcome. Wherever you're watching this right now, whether it's the West location, the East location, our brothers at RCMU, or maybe you're just starting your 4th of July weekend off right out at the lake, welcome. It's our third week in this series, Life Hacks, and the past few weeks we've just been walking through these incredible ways on doing life better. Because who would not want to get better at just doing life? And we've walked through some of these great topics. 2 weeks ago, we talked about integrity and how it's one of the most important gifts we can be giving somebody. And then last week, we talked about being a people of contentment and what it means to escape this culture of I want into a culture of faithfulness to God. And this week, I'm extremely excited that I get to share something near and dear to my heart, and that is the topic of legacy. It's not something we think about a whole lot, but we should be. It's important. Our legacy will actually outlive us, and we play a part in what our legacy says, and God actually cares a lot about what our legacy is. And so I thought, what great way to start this legacy conversation out than by talking about a guy who actually got the opportunity to change his legacy. I'm talking about this guy right here. His name's Alfred, and as you can tell from the photo, he lived a long time ago. Pretty old, a lot older than you and I. I'm thinking 1970s, maybe 1980s even. I don't know. None of us were around back then. But obviously, as you can see, it's from the early 1800s. And Alfred was a Swedish inventor and scientist and just all-around whiz who loved explosives. Particularly one explosive that he always researched, and that was nitroglycerin. See, if you don't know anything about nitroglycerin, it was this deadly, unstable compound that was really the only explosive they had at the time. But it was so unstable that a lot of people didn't want to use it. It caused a lot of accidents. A lot of people died trying to handle it. Alfred decided that he was going to find a way to control it and to make it more effective. Eventually, throughout all of his research, he invented dynamite and did pretty well off of it. He changed industries and how they ran and operated. Mining industry, construction industry, countries were buying this from him as fast as he could make it because it was changing the course of their history. He ended up making a lot of money and lived a very good life. He was very happy with how things were going, and why shouldn't he? He was extremely rich. One day he's sitting down for breakfast and he's reading the newspaper, and he decides he was going to flip to the obituary section. See, his brother had passed away recently, and he thought, maybe his obituary will be in here, and so he went to read it. As he's going through, he realizes that the newspaper actually made a mistake. See, they thought it was Alfred who passed away and not his brother, so it was Alfred's obituary that was in the newspaper. And what a weird and unique opportunity this is for Alfred. Normally, we do not get to hear what people say about us after we've died. I don't know about you, but I don't think I'm going to be able to. Whereas Alfred got that chance. And so he's getting ready to read this, and he's just thinking, I wonder what they're going to remember me for. Maybe it's dynamite, or maybe one of my other discoveries, or maybe it's how I changed this industry or this, or helped this country. And as he's getting excited, he goes to the top, and he sees that the article actually has a title that says, "Merchant of Death is Dead." Now I can bet that's not exactly what Alfred was expecting to read. Probably caught him a little bit by surprise. And as he continues to read this article, it actually says that Alfred made his money by inventing ways to kill people faster than ever before. Pretty harsh. To the newspaper's credit, they were focusing just on the fact that dynamite was used in battle. And so it was killing a lot of people. And in that moment, Alfred realized two very important things. First, that merchant of death would be his legacy. This is what people would remember him for. And the second thing he realized was that is not what he wants to be remembered for. So in that moment, he decides to do something about it. In that moment, he makes the choice to intentionally change his legacy. See, each and every one of us will leave behind a legacy. Some of us have already started leaving behind a legacy. And when I say legacy, this is specifically what I mean. It is what we leave behind, the impression we leave on people. And we will all leave that, which is actually a good thing because the Bible tells us we should be leaving something behind. In Proverbs, it says this: good people leave behind an inheritance to their grandchildren. Now, I'm guessing when most of us see the word inheritance, we instantly go money. Now, it would be great if all of our grandparents left us this mound of money for the rest of our lives, but that's not specifically what it's talking about. What the Bible is saying is that each of us need to leave that impression, that set of values and belief and work ethics. We all need to be leaving a legacy behind that's going to help those coming after us. Now, the problem is we can be intentional or we can be unintentional with what we leave behind, which can be very damaging. I wanted to give you an example of what an unintentional legacy is. And so I kind of have a trivia question for you. There's somebody that I'm thinking of, and I want you to guess who this person is based on some things they did that we would remember them by. The first is this person was a national football player. Not just a good football player, he was a great football player, a Hall of Famer, in fact. And he was a running back, and over the course of his career, there were 4 different seasons that he led the NFL in rushing yards. Pretty spectacular. And now he is still actually holding the record for fastest player to reach 2,000 rushing yards in a single season. Now, that's a feat that most guys have never even done. He's done it the fastest. It's pretty incredible. Now, if you don't know what I'm thinking, let me give you one more hint, or another hint. Before he, or after he retired, he was actually very successful in television. He was on sitcoms and was on the television a lot and had a lot of success. If you still don't know what I'm talking about, I'm going to give you one more hint. You see this, and now the person you're thinking of may be a little bit different than who you were thinking of before. When you see white Bronco, you don't associate that with a great football player. And if you don't know who I'm talking about yet, I'm obviously talking about O.J. Simpson, who was a great football player, one of the best football players we have ever seen, but that's not exactly what he's remembered for, is it? While we could be thinking about his stats and everything he did on television, we're too busy wondering whether or not he actually did it. And we all have an opinion, and that's all we really think about. And I'm sure that's not what he would want to have left behind, but O.J. was pretty unintentional with what his legacy was. Thankfully for us, the Bible has given us some great examples of what intentional legacies are. And today I wanted to share one with you. So there's a story about a man named Nehemiah. Nehemiah was in the Old Testament, and he was living in Babylon at the time. Now, he was a Jewish man who was from Jerusalem originally. But what happened in that day, the country of Babylon went to Jerusalem and destroyed the city and took everyone captive and sent them back as prisoners to Babylon. Well, after a little while, they set them all free, and then all of the Israelites and the Jewish people had a choice. They could either stay in Babylon or they could go back to Jerusalem. And Nehemiah stayed because he had a fantastic job. He was the king's cupbearer, which I know sounds weird, but that means he was one of the most trusted people to the king. The king had to trust him with his life. He spent every single day with the king, making sure that his cup was safe. It was a very important job because back in that time, there was a lot of threats and a lot of people who were trying to assassinate the leaders. Something that, listen, I know we have never heard of something crazy like that before. Who would threaten to assassinate a leader? Am I right? It doesn't happen, does it? Anymore, hopefully. But he spent his entire time in the palace with the king, not worrying about anything but this cup. He didn't have to worry about his money, what he was going to eat, what he was going to drink, what he was going to wear, where he was going to stay. He had a very good life. He just had to focus on this cup. Well, one day he was talking to his brother and some of the other guys that did go back to Jerusalem. And he asked them, how are things going back home? And the response he didn't like. They said to me, things are not going well for those who return to the province of Judah. They're in great trouble and disgrace. The wall of Jerusalem has been torn down, and the gates have been destroyed by fire. I want you to understand something, that when the gates of a city are torn down, it's not a city. I mean, imagine if Rapid City was destroyed and we just continued to live here without picking it up. I mean, what a defeated, shameful way to live. They were disgraced, they were hurt, they were hopeless. And this was not something Nehemiah was expecting, and it broke his heart. In fact, Nehemiah responded this way: when I heard this, I sat down and wept. In fact, for days I mourned, fasted, and prayed to the God of heaven. It broke Nehemiah's heart that Jerusalem was just a wreck. And he started praying, God, this can't be what you have for Jerusalem, is it? This can't be what you have for the people. There's got to be something better. I mean, you want something better than that for Jerusalem. That was the legacy of Jerusalem, that it was just a destroyed city. And he began to pray that God do something. And he prayed this: please remember what you told your servant Moses. If you are unfaithful to me, I will scatter you among the nations. But if you return to me and obey my commands and live by them, then even if you are exiled till the ends of the earth, I will bring you back to the place I have chosen for my name to be honored. The people you rescued by your great power and strong hand are your servants. O Lord, please hear my prayer. Listen to the prayers of those of us who delight in honoring you. Nehemiah was realizing that God did have something better for Jerusalem. The legacy of Jerusalem was a city that would honor God, a city that would hold its holy people. It was better than what it was, and he knew that God had a plan to do something to change the legacy of Jerusalem, and that plan involved Nehemiah. So Nehemiah ended his prayer this way: please grant me success today by making the king favorable to me. Put it in his heart to be kind to me. Nehemiah knew that a defeated city was not what Jerusalem wanted to leave behind. It's not what God wanted to leave behind. It's not what he wanted to leave behind. But he needed to do something about it. Growing up, I watched this really unhealthy relationship in my parents. It was a constant struggle. There was a lot of fighting and arguing and a lot of hurting one another, and it eventually led to a lot of pain and heartbreak and divorce. And as I watched that, I remember thinking in high school and even in college, I'm not going to be anything like my parents. I'm not going to be anything like them. Well, just like most kids, they turn out just like their parents. And so I began seeking out all of these really unhealthy relationships that would just follow the same pattern my parents did. A lot of arguing, a lot of fighting, a lot of disrespect, a lot of mistrust, and eventually a lot of heartbreak. And they just continued down this same path, and I just continued to struggle, wondering why this is going to keep happening to me. Well, one day I was having a conversation with somebody, and I told them my name, Chris Erickson. And when you hear Erickson, you think, oh, I know Ericksons. I bet I know your family. You don't. There are a lot of Ericksons. But they asked who my parents were. And I told them, and this time they happened to know who they were. And the response wasn't great. They actually told me that they felt sorry for me. They apologized for what I had to go through growing up and watching all of that play out. And it just struck me. That's what we were known for. That's what the Ericksons were remembered for. That's what we left behind, was this unhealthy relationship model. And I just remember walking away thinking, God, is that really the best that you have for me? I mean, is that what Ericksons are going to be known for? Just really bad relationships, just a lot of hurt and heartbreak? There's got to be something better than this. And like Nehemiah, I began to pray, God, I know you have something better for the Erickson name. I know you have something better for us. And just like he answered Nehemiah, he answered me. He said, yes, I have something better. There's a better legacy out there. I have a plan, and that plan involves you doing something. So in that moment, I realized that I had to do something. There's something very important we all need to understand, and that is that God cares about our legacy. I mean, he cares about what we leave behind. The question is, do you care about what you leave behind? You know, maybe a better question to ask would be this: what do you care about the most? It's what we care about the most that we will focus on. That'll be our priority. That'll be what we leave behind. If we care about me being known as a hard worker, that's what we'll leave behind. If we care about just having fun, going with the flow, if we care about justice or maybe revenge, if we care about never trusting people, that's what we're going to be known for. That's what our legacy will be. We need to understand what we care about the most if we want to start walking out this intentional legacy, because God cares and he has a plan for our legacy, and it involves us doing something. So what is that doing something? Well, that's where our life hacks come in. We have some keys, some life hacks to leaving a godly legacy behind, and I want to walk those out with you today. The first key to leaving a godly legacy is that it demands intentionality. I want you to understand that Nehemiah did not just say, God, something should be done, and leave it at that. No, he knew that he needed to take action. So this is actually what he did after he prayed. He went to the king and said this: with a prayer to the God of heaven, I replied, if it please the king, and if you are pleased with me, your servant, send me to Judah, rebuild the city where my ancestors are buried. He actually stepped out of his nice, easy, cushy job and went back to Jerusalem to rebuild the wall. He went from the best job he could have had to being essentially a day laborer, knowing he had to do something. He had to be intentional. But it didn't stop there. He didn't just change jobs. He made a plan. That conversation continues with the king, and he continues here. I also said to the king, if it please the king, let me have letters addressed to the governors of the province west of the Euphrates River, instructing them to let me travel safely through their territories on my way to Judah. And please give me a letter addressed to Asaph, the manager of the king's forest, instructing him to give me timber. I will need it to make beams for the gates of the temple fortress, for the city walls, and for a house for myself. And the king granted these requests because the gracious hand of God was on me. He didn't just decide, okay, I'm going to go do something. No, he made a plan. Being intentional demands a plan. And I use the word demand there because we cannot do this without intentionality. Without these life hacks we're going to walk out, you cannot leave a godly legacy behind. It demands intentionality. I knew that I could not just say to God, okay, I want to leave something better behind, and then assume he was going to do everything without me having to do something also. It took me being intentional. It took me caring about that. If we want to leave a godly legacy, we have to be intentional. It demands it. The second one is this: leaving a godly legacy demands a selfless focus. I want you to hear a conversation that Nehemiah had with the king, because he had an intention to go rebuild Jerusalem, but it wasn't for himself. Here, read this. Then the king with the queen sitting beside him, asked me, "How long will the journey take? And when will you get back?" It pleased the king to send me, so I set a time. I wanted to highlight that, so I set a time. Because what we need to understand is that Nehemiah is not rebuilding this city for himself. He's not going with the intention of making a kingdom for himself. He's not rebuilding the walls in this city so people could honor and praise him for what he's done. He's not going to make himself king or president or lord over Jerusalem. No, after he was done, he was heading back to his duties in Babylon. He was not going to reap all the benefits of a rebuilt city, but he knew others would. Leaving a godly legacy means we may not get to reap all of the benefits of doing so, but we can be sure people after us will. Does that matter to us? See, some of us are so focused on building up ourselves. We want people to see us as successful, as hardworking, as making good choices, as being a winner. We care about people seeing us in a good light, that sometimes our priority, our focus becomes, how do I make sure people look to me as a winner, as a good person, as a strong Christian, as a good leader? How do they look to me? And our focus comes back to us. A good question to ask yourself is, maybe, will your legacy be a memorial to you, or will it be an opportunity for others? You know, Nehemiah knew he was going to go do this great work, and then he was going to go back to Babylon. He wasn't doing it for himself. I realized in that moment that God had a better legacy for me, that it wasn't just for me. Yes, I wanted a better relationship with my soon-to-be wife, but it wasn't just for us. It was for my kids, my grandkids, their grandkids. I needed to put in the work now for them. I wanted to give them an opportunity to have healthier, better relationships moving forward. Our legacy can be a celebration of us or a life-giving gift to someone else. Number 3. And if you've loved the first 2, you'll really love this one. Leaving a godly legacy demands work. I want you to imagine what would have happened if Nehemiah decided that he was going to go do something. And so he decided, okay, I'm going to make all these plans. I'm going to talk to the king. I'm going to head to Jerusalem, and then someone's going to rebuild the wall. Not a whole lot of stuff would have happened. Or imagine that he decided, all right, I'm going to go and do this, but after a few days, he was like, I'm bored of this. I'm going to go do something else. The wall would not have got done. Leaving a legacy takes work. And in fact, it doesn't just take it, it demands work. And not just a weekend. Not just a few hours here or there. It takes a lifetime of work. It demands that we continue to put in time and energy and sweat. You know, I knew that I couldn't just say, okay, God, fix me so all of my relationships would be better. No, it demanded that I put in some work. In that moment, I knew that, okay, I had to give up dating. I had to start going to counseling. I had to start working through some of the issues in my life, some of the bad habits, some of the bad attitudes, some of the hurts, some of the wounds that were still there, causing all of these issues in my relationship. God had a lot of work to do in me, and if I wanted to leave a godly legacy behind, it demanded that that work be done. I want to leave this with you. If you are in a position where you are waiting for somebody else to do the work for you, I hope you enjoy waiting. Number 4, leaving a godly legacy demands discipline. You know, for Nehemiah, this was not an easy road. This wasn't something where he had the king's support and everybody else's support. He actually had a lot of opposition. A lot of different leaders in a lot of different countries were not happy with what he was doing, so they constantly tried to stop him. They would try and manipulate him and say, hey, the king's really mad at you. You should stop this. They were trying to create doubt and fear in his mind. And Nehemiah had to make the choice of, I'm either going to give up, get afraid, quit, or be undeterred by circumstance? And he would respond the same way every time. In fact, this is how he responded. So I replied by sending this message to them. I'm engaged in a great work, so I can't come. Why should I stop working to come and meet with you? 4 times they sent me the same message, and each time I gave them the same reply. We are going to be constantly bombarded by the desire to quit, the desire to take the easy road. But we need to be undeterred by circumstance. I'll be honest with you. When I started going back to counseling, and especially when I gave up dating, there were plenty of times where I thought, okay, you know what, God, I would actually really rather date, because that's fun. But leaving a godly legacy behind demanded discipline. It demands it of us. Are we willing to discipline ourselves? Not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually. Are we willing to say, okay, I'm going to make a plan and I'm going to stick with it, and I don't care what happens. I don't care if this, in the next few weeks I decide I want to do something different, or I decide I don't enjoy this anymore, or I decide something else is easier. Am I going to be undeterred by circumstance? Because it demands it. But maybe for you today, you need to decide for yourself, okay, does this matter to me? It matters to God. I promise you it matters to God. And He has a wonderful legacy that He wants to share with you. We need to decide if it matters to us. So I hope you're thinking about this question today. What do you want to leave behind? What do you want to be remembered for? What do you want people to think of when they think of you? Do you want them to think of Jesus when they think of you? Or do you want them to remember how much pain you caused, or how much of a hassle you were, or how you didn't spend enough time investing in your family or your church or your community? What do you want them to remember you by? So maybe the better question to be asking you is actually this: what will your obituary say? Our friend Alfred at the beginning actually got to read his. And it's not something most of us get to do, but I heard a great line the other day, and that is that every single day we are currently writing our obituary. So we may not get to read it fully, but it's being written right now. So what will yours say? Alfred saw his, and he decided he didn't like it. Specifically, what he ended up doing was making a lot of changes, investing 94% of his fortune into these awards that he wanted to give out in promotion of peace. This Medal of Excellence for Science and Humanitarian Aid and literary work and all of the promotion of peace, because he didn't want to be known as a merchant of death anymore. He wanted to be known as a promoter of peace. So that's the award he made. This award specifically, maybe you've seen it, maybe you've heard of it. It was created by a man named Alfred Nobel. It's the Nobel Peace Prize, one of the most prestigious awards we can get globally. One man decided he didn't like his obituary and impacted the world. Just imagine what God could do with us if we decided to be intentional with leaving behind a legacy that shows people who Jesus is. That's His plan for us. That's what He wants for us. Is that what we want for us? I love you guys. I love you so much. And I'm so happy we get to talk about this. I just hope you realize that if one man can impact history, we as a people, there's no telling what God could do with us. Let me pray for you. Dear Lord, I could only imagine the legacies that you want to leave behind through the lives that we live. You took 12 men who were fishermen and changed the course of history forever. Their legacies didn't have to be disciples of Christ. They could have just been fishermen, and it would have been fine. But you had something better for them. Lord, I pray that each and every person in here listening understands that you love them so, so much, and you care about what they leave behind, and you want to be a part of it, and you have a plan for using us in that. I believe that you want to change the world through our legacies, Lord. We love you so much, and we're so thankful that you love us. Amen.